if you aren't raising funding, it's not because the funding isn't there, it's because your idea isn't good enough, or you don't have traction, or you don't have a proven track record. These things matter to funders, to investors, to angels, and to banks.
What are the unique risks and challenges facing small business owners in South Africa? Well, joining me to discuss this is Nic Haralambous, who is a speaker, serial entrepreneur, and advisor to small businesses in South Africa. Nic, given your experience with starting and managing startups in South Africa, what are some of your perspectives that you can share with our viewers about the unique risks and challenges of this operating environment?
Yeah, thanks for having me, David. And anyone who's ever heard me talk knows that I'm aggressively, brutally intense about this answer. Having been an entrepreneur since I was 16, in South Africa specifically, it's a very difficult climate to build businesses, and you very rarely notice and realize that until you are outside of the country. And look, we do have some complicated macroeconomic and political situations that make building things in South Africa difficult. And that is a double-edged sword, right? There is obviously a lot of opportunity in complicated markets for those people who are willing to push through the intense nature of being an entrepreneur. And it is intense, it's hard, it's mentally difficult, it's physically difficult. So I think that to kick things off, one of the things that I've noticed over the last decade of building is, as much as there is opportunity in South Africa, it is a very small market. To put that into context, Germany's e-commerce spend in a year is the equivalent of South Africa's GDP. That is a staggering difference, that if you are building an online business in South Africa, you're looking at a fraction of the percentage of any other country that is developed in the world. So that makes it much harder to build. So if you spend 5 years building a business in South Africa versus 5 years building the same business in the UK or Germany, for example, you are more likely to have a sustainable business, because here you're fighting for a much smaller part of the pie. And look, that doesn't mean it's not possible. There are lots of successful businesses. It just means you have to grind a little bit harder and fight a little bit more intensely with your competitors when they arrive. So that is one of the more complicated things. On that point, though, one of the things that I'm trying to help younger entrepreneurs understand is your expectations are often the thing that makes it complicated. Is if you're expecting to have a R1 billion business in South Africa, you're probably not going to achieve that. There are very few R1 billion businesses, and if you're looking in dollar terms, almost no $1 billion businesses that have come from South Africa that still exist here and only operate in this country. So that's one of the big things that we need to look at. Then something else to consider is, if you're looking to build a business now, or your business is based off of import and export, that's going to be complicated for the next 2 years. With COVID restrictions coming into play, it does make it a little bit complicated. I've actually pulled back from one of my own business ideas that was an import-based business for that very reason. I think that if you're going to struggle to build a business, there are enough complications without having to add that to the mix. And on that point, a little side addition to this is South Africans believe that we get one shot at entrepreneurship. We have one good idea for our whole lives. There was a study done 5 or 6 years ago in the US and Europe versus African entrepreneurs, and most developed market entrepreneurs quit being an entrepreneur after 3.5 attempts. In South Africa, that's one. After one attempt, most entrepreneurs stop. And that's a staggering issue in a country trying to build entrepreneurs, is we think we get one shot, and we don't. Your one idea is not the only one you're going to have. Building this $1 million thought into a big business, you've got lots of time. If you look at taking 10 years to build a business and you're 30 now, you can build 5 businesses before you die. That's a lot of time to build things. So if one idea doesn't work, chuck it away and move on and get to the next one. Then look, one of the other complications is obviously that we are in a recession. We're more than likely heading towards a depression, and we're not going to get back to economic levels of 2019 until projected 2023 or 2024. That means that people are spending less, they're tightening their belts, they're trying to save. So any business idea that you had that was a frivolous idea that was people going to spend random money on is probably going to struggle over the next 3 to 4 years, and it's going to take you a longer time to break even or be profitable.
So, Nic, what about funding issues in South Africa? We often hear that there's a lack of available funding for startups and entrepreneurs in South Africa. What are your perspectives on that?
Yeah, so the very first point that I make that I want to hammer home is if you aren't raising funding, it's not because the funding isn't there, it's because your idea isn't good enough, or you don't have traction, or you don't have a proven track record. These things matter to funders, to investors, to angels, and to banks. So often entrepreneurs look outward and go, oh, the industry is broken. Well, the truth is, I know in 2020, one of the roughest years for entrepreneurs, I know of lots of venture capitalists in South Africa who invested in multiple businesses and not only built them, but also exited lots of businesses through 2020. So it wasn't a down year for VC. It wasn't a down year for funding. What we struggle with in South Africa is good ideas that scale and good entrepreneurs to build those things. So if you're struggling to build funding, find funding, then you have to look at yourself, your idea, and your traction before you start blaming external factors. It's a very common thing that I've seen from South African entrepreneurs is, oh, my idea is amazing. All these VCs don't know what they're talking about. They don't want to give me money. Well, money is really not that hard to come by if you're an entrepreneur worth their salt. What I do like to tell people if they're struggling to raise funding for a new and interesting idea is the best kind of funding is sales. What you need is customers paying you money. Then you will raise money easier. Profitable businesses raise money with ease. They raise money from a position of power, not a position of struggle. So if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, the first thing you need to do, find customers, get them to pay you and do it consistently. And then you're probably going to find funding easier and more than likely not need it anyways.
So, Nic, what about labor-related issues? South Africa has a very contentious labor market. Any entrepreneur is going to have to make hiring decisions if they want to grow their business. So, what are some of the challenges of the South African labor market specifically, and how can entrepreneurs avoid some of those risks?
Yeah, so the core issue that most business owners will face is a very simple one, said in very simple terms. You always want to hire slowly and fire quickly. That is kind of the startup mantra when it comes to employees. In South Africa, that is virtually impossible. Hiring slowly, great, you can do it. Firing quickly is not an option. You have got hoops to jump through. You've got CCMA issues. And I understand the basic premise of why this exists. But for agile startups trying to build new and innovating businesses, it's extremely difficult to find people who fit you culturally and then keep them. And then if they don't fit you culturally, to remove them. And we all know that bad apples can really rot a business from the inside out very quickly. So these employment issues create complications for young businesses trying to roll with the punches and stay stable but agile. And one of the solutions here, which is actually out of COVID, a positive for South African businesses, is that globalization is now really pervasive. There are no more excuses that you have to build local and sell local. You can be local and sell anywhere. People expect video calls. They are welcoming of video conferencing. Your customers and staff can be anywhere in the world. And if you are thinking long-term, they should be. As a South African business, you've got a low cost base, and you should be trying to generate hard currency income in the form of pounds, dollars, or euros, and getting your customers on a global scale. So that's one of the advantages. We've spoken about the struggle so far, but one of the things you should be planning slowly and carefully is how do you take your business and brand to a global audience to allow you to make your business a bit more resilient?
Okay, so an entrepreneur must try to operate as minimally as possible, to be lean and efficient in terms of the structure of the organization, and be working with outsiders as much as possible, not being solely rooted in the domestic market.
We should really all be considering how we can be leaner as individuals, as households, and as businesses at this point. There really are two ways to have stable financial situations. The one is to earn more money. The other is to spend less money. And it's really simple. If you combine both of those, you go out and get more sales and you lower your cost base as a business, you're going to be okay. But if you continue to spend yourself into nowhere and you're not generating the sales that a depression are going to allow you to do, then you're going to be in trouble.
All right, that's it from me, David Ansara of the Center for Risk Analysis. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the link in the description below to our 30-day free trial. Until next time, take care.